The Culture Pop Podcast is brought to you by the law offices of Jacob Emrani.
Accident or injury, call Jacob Emrani. Call Jacob.
Hey, it's Mace. If you or a friend or loved one is injured in an accident, the first person you should call is my friend Jacob. When I did this, Jacob was great. He helped me by talking through the next steps, which really put my mind at ease. When you're injured in an accident, you got to have an expert. That's why you call Jacob, just like I did. Call Jacob, 844-24-JACOB. That's 844-24-JACOB, or visit calljacob.com.
Call Jacob.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Culture Pop Podcast. I'm Steve Mason, along with Sue Kalinsky. This is the show where we talk about everything pop culture, and unbelievable guest today. Icon, legend, in my business, in the radio business, Phil Hendrie is coming on. There's a brand new documentary about Phil's life called Hendry that you've got to watch. If you've never seen Phil do his stuff, it'll happen on this show, and you can also catch him at philhendrieshow.com and the documentary. Sue, what's going on?
Same old, training.
How's it? When's the big race? It is Saturday the
27th.
27th. Are you getting nervous?
No, I'm not nervous. I'm actually really, really excited. I'm over the hump of worrying about swimming, because that is the most difficult leg of this race.
Are you worried about sharks?
I am not worried about sharks.
I'm telling you, there are sharks out there.
There's no sharks in the bay.
I've seen the drone shots. There are so many sharks. And the other thing you have to watch out for is orcas. Now, orcas are actually taking down ships.
The only sharks and orcas in this particular area are blow-up dolls.
I couldn't do it because of the sharks. I couldn't.
That's the only reason. That's the only reason you couldn't do it.
I could swim. I don't want to be in there with the sharks. So, by the way, I am super sore today. I'm in the middle of this body transformation. We talked, obviously, with Katie O'Brien about
body transformation.
It's a body transformation. It really is.
Okay. Is when he said to you, "Why are you here?" You said, "I'm here to transform my body."
I did. Well, see, he did this with Chris Evans.
Okay.
So Chris Evans, I think, was like a scrawny little kid, and then went to my trainer, Steve Zim.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I saw him where I swim, and he was getting sand kicked in his face. Okay.
So that he trained Christian Bale and Michael Keaton. So two of the 5 Batmans.
Okay.
No Adam West. But I am sore as hell.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah. So I want to talk a little bit about radio. We got Phil Hendrie coming up. So tell a couple of stories I've rarely told before. So, Sue, I got on the radio when I was 15 years old. You know how I did it?
Practice.
Well, I did. This was sort of the rest. So I go to a local Christian radio station, and I said, you know what you guys need? You need a sportscast every day. So I bought 5 minutes of time every afternoon at 5 o'clock, and I did a 5-minute sportscast. Now, they didn't do it for free. I had to pay for it, which meant I had to go out and sell ads that would then run during the show, and I would make enough money on the ads to be able to pay for the time. I think I broke even at the end of the day, but I was only 15 and I was doing this.
And how much did it cost you?
I think it cost like $125.
Well, that's a lot of money for a 15-year-old.
That was a lot for a 15-year-old, especially back then. So I did that. And I also did, by the way, I had this little phone coupler system in my bedroom. So I would come home from school, I would write my sportscast, and then I would set up my phone coupler system, and I would do my sportscast live on WGOR, where those Christians were hungry for some sports.
Now, what teams were these? Were the professional sports, or was it local sports?
I tried to do local high school sports. I tried to do the local teams, like the Toledo Mud Hens. I did. We talked about the Tigers and the Indians and the Browns, just because there were so many fans. I think we talked about Ohio State football, but it was very local geared. And it was a gigantic hit with Christians.
Wow, that was brilliant.
Yeah. Now, so let me tell you one more. So I'm a kid, and again, I'm a weird kid. Let's be honest about this.
Look, you're a weird adult.
Thank you for noticing. So there was a guy named Ron Tyndall, disc jockey, who was on 1370 WSPD in Toledo. It was a local talk station. So at night, he would play music. He would come on at night and he would play music. And every night he had an opportunity for you to be a guest DJ. You could call in and be the guest DJ. And I would write out my little thing and I would go on with Ron Tyndall and I would say, and now here's Captain and Tenio with Love Will Keep Us Together. And I was the guest DJ. So eventually Ron said, you know what? You can only do it once a week. You can do it once a week, but that's it. Because I would call every night. I would want to do it every single night. But I ultimately did get once a week, which was a thrill to be Ron Tyndall's guest DJ on 1370 WSPD.
How old was Ron Tyndall?
Never met him. Don't know where he is. The show was called Tyndall on Tap.
Uh-huh.
Oh, the old Tyndall on Tap show.
Very catchy.
Very catchy. Yes, it was very popular. The thing about radio, and we did it together, is that it is a very personal medium. I mean, we'll talk to Phil about this, but you have a relationship with the people who listen, and it's a pretty intimate relationship. Even now, somebody's listening either on their earbuds or they're watching on YouTube. We're kind of laying it out there. We're real and we're honest and we're talking about whatever we want. And ultimately, people invest in you. So the one thing I've noticed over the years is the more I put myself out there, I did it with mental health. I did it with, being gay. I did it. Lots of different, I reveal a lot of stuff, and all those things become connection points for people. Because what you want somebody to say, as if they're a regular listener of yours, is, oh, I know him. I know him. It's a personal relationship. You experienced that in New York, where you had that sort of personal is that something you felt while it was going on?
Oh yeah, sure. And I was still doing stand-up at the time. So I'd performed in New York for so many years.
Yeah.
So, I bumped into people who knew me from my stand-up, so, and now, it is just mushroomed into all of this social media. So not only do people get to know you from listening to your show, but they go on your Facebook page, or they go on your Twitter, or they go on your Instagram. So there's so many outlets for people to be connected to you and know about you. Like, if there are certain things that we don't talk about here, I may say something, I may write something or post something that's, personal on my social media. So it's, yeah.
So I got a question. I was just thinking back to your stand-up days, and I'm wondering this. When you were in Germany and you walked into a drugstore and you were looking for, you know where I'm going?
Yes.
You were looking for condoms. How did you ask for them?
Something about, what did I call it?
Cockenblocken.
Cockenblocken. Octa Lieben, Dicken, Slocken, Cockenblocken.
That was my favorite of your jokes.
And they knew what I meant.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It was my favorite of your jokes when I used to go see you do stand-up. And I would often repeat it on WNEW and steal the punchline repeatedly.
Oh, God.
So you listen to Phil Hendrie a lot, right?
Oh, yeah. I think, I remember the first time I heard his show, and, he did a disclaimer in the beginning, but I never listened to it from the beginning. So the first time I heard him, I didn't know whether it was real or not, which I'm sure a lot of people didn't.
Sure.
And one of the conversations he was having was, he was talking about Hitler, and he was like promoting Hitler as like a really nice guy, right? And the caller was just beside herself. And I'm home, I'm like, I can't believe that he's talking about Hitler in such a positive way. And it was like, he was sensitive. He was an artist.
Oh, God.
I was like,
Oh, God.
this guy is insane. He's going to get fired.
Yeah.
But it was the same feeling I got when I finally found out that it was a ruse. When the first time I saw Saturday Night Live, the first year that it came out, I was hanging out with a group of friends. I was, I don't know, 18 or something like that.
Right.
And it was maybe, well, obviously it was 11 something at night. And we were all waiting to go out to, at that hour, we were going to a bar or whatever. And the TV was on and some commercial appears.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't remember exactly what it was, but it was like, what is this real? I didn't know what it was. And then, of course, I found out that it was Saturday Night Live. But that was the same feeling I had with Phil Hendrie.
Yeah. What's interesting about Saturday Night Live is that when we were in New York and before that, you had to be home at 11:30 on a Saturday night to be able to watch it. Otherwise, you had to get a VHS tape, and because there was no DVR, so you built your life. And we were talking about The Sopranos the other day. Same thing. You had to be home at, I think it was 9 o'clock on a Sunday night to see it. Otherwise, you had to get the VHS tape, which I was never good at all. And so you had to watch stuff live. And that doesn't exist today. Now we all shuffle our DVRs and watch stuff whenever we want to. God, I just thought of a story and I can't tell him.
Oh, but okay. Oh, you can't.
It's too much.
Okay.
Is
but
it too much even for the podcast? It's a podcast.
I don't think anything's too much for the podcast.
Yeah, I guess you're right. All right. So I'll tell this story. So I was leaving New York. I don't know why this story popped into my head. Leaving New York. And I used to go to a video store and rent porno movies. Again, pre-internet porn, all that stuff. So when my mom was moving me out of my apartment, helping me to move out of my apartment in New York, she asked me this question: what is ball gravy?
Is it like meatball gravy?
Oh no, I knew what it was.
No, I know. I'm joking.
Because I had a tape sitting there, a VHS tape that was labeled ball gravy. So my mom, I said, Mom, that's something I'm not ready to talk to you about.
And did you ever talk to her about it?
No, never did. Never did. But it never came. Ball gravy never came up again.
Oh,
now, do you think that was okay to put on the podcast?
I think it's fine to put on the podcast.
I do too. The podcast is just the podcast. Absolutely. All right. Well, after all that, ladies and gentlemen, he is an icon. He is a legend. He is one of the greatest radio personalities in the history of the world. There's now a brand new documentary about his life and career. It's called Hendry. The great Phil Hendrie joins us. Phil, thanks a lot for coming on, man.
You're welcome. And I'm just closing out a window, and this thing says, "You are now recording." And it obliterated you and everybody between me and you. So,
well, the good news is we're actually still recording.
Here we are. Yeah.
So that's good. Hey, it is an honor to get you on the, I'm a huge fan, have been for many, many years. In fact, one of our highlights for Mason and Ireland was one morning when you actually called into the show, I think as Margaret, and
really?
It was a thrill to have Margaret Gray on the show.
That must have been something you and I planned.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
I just saw John at a wedding up in Central California.
He told me that. Yeah.
He's a mutual friend of ours. My buddy's daughter marrying a guy whose family is tight with John. That's kind of
I need a flow chart to figure that out.
Exactly. Yeah. But it's awesome to talk to you, man. Like I was mentioning to you before we went on the air, and if you're hearing noise, and I was hoping this would be over by the time I got on the air, they're putting in a new furnace in my house.
Oh, okay. Well,
I apologize for that.
So far, so good. Can't hear anything.
Good.
Yeah,
That's
which is great. So, Phil, I'm wondering from you, I as a kid, I grew up on radio. I used to listen to the radio all night long. I listened to guys like Larry King and Tom Snyder and that middle of the night thing. And I was a kid. Like I was in junior high when I was doing that. Did you grow up on radio?
Oh, brother, where do I begin? I woke up in the middle of the night, and a little did I know at that time, because you're a kid and you have all this energy, but I actually had sleep issues, So I'd wake up and I'd listen to the radio. The next day you're fine. You got all the energy. But I listened to KRLA overnight. I listened to Bill Slater. I used to listen to Emperor Hudson in the morning on KRLA. Was our local rock station here in L.A. Competing with 𝐒𝐡𝐢𝐥 successfully. 𝐒𝐡𝐢𥥗 came on the air in '65 when I was a junior in high school and just kicked the crap out of everybody, and everyone was excited about them. But KRLA was sort of doing their little progressive rock thing. I listened to the overnights, Bill Slater, William F. Williams. I would listen anything I could pick up. I'd listen to the Skip from Salt Lake City. That's how
right.
I would. You know what I'm saying?
I'd listen to baseball. I'd listen to out-of-town baseball games just to know what was going on in Chicago or in Cincinnati or in St. Louis. I could hear all those games in Toledo, Ohio.
Yeah, I listened to the Padres when they were still in the PCL.
Wow.
On 𝐒𝐞𝐳 radio, they played at Westgate Park. Did you hear that?
Yeah. No, not at all.
No,
Okay,
no.
I listened to the Padres when they were playing at Westgate Park on KOGO radio, and they were in the PCL, and they were winning the PCL. And I even remember a name from the Padre lineup that eventually had some notoriety in Major League Baseball, Tommy Helms, who went on for the Cincinnati Reds. Yeah. The Padres Reds AAA farm club back then, but I didn't know anything about that. I just knew we would take trips to San Diego to visit my brother who was in the Navy, and they were very proud of the Padres being the Pacific Coast League champions back in those days. I mean, this is the kind of goofy kid that the kids that you and I were, just living and dying and breathing. The radio was a fascinating thing,
Yeah, I mean, I think that it is, and people. I went to a TV news director one time, and she said, "Do you have any regrets? Like maybe you should have done more TV?" I'm like, "No, radio is the best. It's an absolute art. Spoken word is an art, and you demonstrated that over your career, and particularly in your kind of glory era on KFI back in the day. Just brilliant stuff."
Well, it's satire. It satirizes radio, what we've done. And got me into a little bit of trouble from time to time doing it as well. In fact, I never did get a good look at the hate mail that some of the stations received, but a lot of it had mostly to do with, do you understand the damage he's being did? I'm not stupid. You understand it's other people that are dumb. Sure. Yeah. And the damage that's being done is terrible. The only thing I regret about radio is it seems to have slid into an era of irrelevance from this standpoint only. People used to talk about what they heard on the radio. They used to say, "Hey, did you hear so-and-so this morning? Did you hear such and such?" And I don't hear people do that anymore. Maybe it's because of the prevalence of podcasting, the internet, and every other bloody thing that we have to listen to. But it used to dominate people's lives, our lives. In the car, on came the radio, and you were listening to that all the way to work. So, yeah, I mean, I dug it. From the time I was 5 years old, listening to it overnight, traveling to Canada with my family to visit my grandparents and listening to the overnight radio with my dad. And I'm 5 years old, and I'm hearing this dude who seemed to control the world. He's telling me the weather, the music. He's talking to me. He's got all the information, but there's just one guy, and he's somewhere in Boise or he's in Denver. I just thought it was the best. And I thought it was the coolest job in the world. And my brother went into acting. And I've actually done acting now in my life, but back in the day, in my teenage years, I thought acting was rather lame. I didn't want to do what I saw those clowns doing on television. I wanted the coolest job in the world, which is being a disc jockey.
So when did it come to you to come up with fictional characters and then become the conversation, just you talking to yourself?
Yeah, that's wanting to control the presentation. So I could have hired actors, but that's going to cost money and take time, and who's going to want to do it? But I had these theatrical scenarios in my mind, and I decided to just go ahead and do them myself, because I was always been a mimic and always been a voice guy from the time I was 5. My first impression was James Mason that sounds pretty weird for a 5-year-old, but there I was talking to my parents, I say, Mr. Kaplan, can I carry your bags? And I'm 5. So, yeah.
Well, that was me too. I was an impressionist as a kid. So I did James Mason too.
James Mason, yes, but the nasal thing, and yeah. And so I thought, well, this is cool. Let's just do these voices. And then I realized something happened. People called and wanted to talk to the guy that I was talking to, which was me. I was talking to myself. And that began the phone call connection, where people were calling up and saying, that Iraqi you're talking to, let me talk to him. Sure. Like, here he is. Hello, what can I do for you? And it reached its absurd heights when I had a psychic call me in Miami. She was a well-known psychic, and I won't mention her name to preserve her dignity. But she said, and the man you're talking to, I sense that he's got some death in his family, and she's talking about a made-up voice. So that was pretty whack. But yeah, and so once people began to respond to it with the phone calls, then we realized it became rather interactive, and that set us off in a whole other uncharted territory,
So how does it work? Did you press like a button and it would make it sound like a phone call, or did you have a voice box, or how did all that work?
Actually, I just used the phone just because you're improvising all along, and I go, wow, here's the telephone. Why don't I talk into the phone? Oh, I called myself because, we have like 15 different lines. So I called. There I am. Well, that sounds cool. The phone, the voice is going through a phone box. And then I thought I could make this even really more realistic. We'll do some loops that sound like you're driving in a car. We'll do another loop that sounds like I think I actually have a laboratory loop, like sound of bubbling test tubes. I don't know why.
Right.
All kinds of different loops, and mostly restaurant, lots of background. And I would do that. And using the phone and using ambient difference, like pulling the phone away to make it sound like one of my characters has a husband that talks in the background, moving the phone closer, this kind of thing. And as I went along, and I started this in Ventura KVEN Radio, which was a small, wonderful radio station, but they 600,000 people in the market. You're not getting phone calls, man. So you're having to fill 3 hours with this stuff, and that's essentially what I did. Yeah, just
going back and forth with the phone.
I have the phone pod here. I have I have my mic pod here, then the phone pod. The thing that you manipulate is the microphone.
The mic,
pod wide open. And the way I don't get any slapback, although I do get it occasionally, is I move the phone away, and I'm like, so how you doing, Bobby? Well, we're fine, Phil. We're going to go to the lake this summer. And yeah, our jailbird brother. What about your jailbird brother? Steve, why don't you just okay? And so, and in your mind, you're seeing how this would happen between people. And a lot of people will say to me, "Gee, Phil, do you ever break into character when you're like making love to your girlfriend?" No, dude, no, no, man. And I actually pay a mortgage, and I pay my bills, and I stay out of jail. It isn't so much that you're nuts; it's that you're facilitating. And I've said this before, and I'm in no way comparing myself to Robin Williams. Please understand that. But Matt Besser, who's a improv comic here in town, said to me once that it's the same muscle. It's the same muscle that you're working, where you're popping in and out of character rapidly, the way he did on stage. And I don't think I've ever seen anybody do it like Robin before or since.
No, he was one of a kind.
My God, so you are kind of working that muscle where you see the conversation happening and you go in and out of character to express something that perhaps you don't want to express. Like, how do I express the world of Bobby Dooley? I have to become her. Because she's actually my mother. She's based on my mom. It's, honey, are you going to wear those jeans to your mom? I'm getting the Nobel Prize for Peace. I know, but you really want to wear that shirt? So it's completely.
So that's all your mom.
It's kind of my mom. Yeah. My mom was kind of, God rest her soul. She was kind of a sociopath and sort of disconnected from the world a little bit emotionally, but I don't blame her. She had a tough life. So.
Yeah, I was going to ask you your connection to some of your characters. Were they people that you knew, or they bits and pieces of people? But you had this character, was it Barnaby Nuxley? And he had like a breathing kind of issue, where it sounded like maybe he was on a ventilator or something. And I'm wondering, Was that something that you improvised in the moment, or was it like, oh, I'm going to make this guy this, I'm going to make him have like a breathing issue?
Yeah, well, what you do is you before you go on the air, rarely have I ever just launched into a brand spanking new character while I'm on the air. Maybe now that I do the podcast, I might, because you can stop and think, and then start the tape again. Whereas if you're doing live radio, but these are all people, yes, that I've heard, that I've known, and then I'll drop things in. This is a voice that I do. I don't know what the character you're talking about, but this character here sounds like every jackass that you a hardware store, And how are you doing, Phil? I'm great. What's your name? My name is Wade Nuxley. Wade, that's Ward. For some reason, I decided he'd keep changing his name because he's got a mental affliction that way. And so I think it's just taking life and standing on its head. But those little character bits where, they just come from the character. I have a character named Chris Norton. He is sexual, he has great sex drive, and that's based on these dudes that I used to hang out with in Florida back in the 70s. They were just like, they had the medallion around their neck. They were drinking rum in the afternoon and having sex with their best friend's girlfriends. They're just completely immoral slob. And they all sounded like jackasses, even though they thought they sounded cool. So it came out, yeah, hey, Phil, you want to go out and check out some chicks this weekend? It's pretty sexual, The guy can't say the word sex. So I because of that, I came up with, well, maybe he has a sinus problem.
Why do you say says?
Well, I'm not saying says. Well, I have a bit of a sinus problem. If that's what you mean, that kind of thing. So, yeah.
What was the first voice that was it at KBEN that you did this for the first time? Because I remember I read about it was leading up to Desert Shield.
Gulf War, yeah. Well, Raj Fanian was the first, because this was going, the voice of an Iraqi or Middle Easterner was going to be a real, it was going to be a real fire starter, back then. So to come on the radio to say, American troops, you're going to get your ass kicked, this kind of stuff is just absolutely inflammatory. And that's what we did. And immediately these people started calling, I want to talk to that Iraqi. Well, I don't mean to be disrespectful, but you made toilet paper with a Saddam Hussein's face on it. So you wipe with Saddam Hussein, but what if I wipe with Bush? Well, and you can imagine, you could just, once you have people hooked, you can take them anywhere. You can go anywhere with this stupid stuff. And the best, what are they going to do? You're nuts. You're crazy. As a matter of fact, I think this whole thing's a setup. Yeah, you would think that, No.
Yeah, like I know that you definitely ruffled a lot of feathers with real, people, real callers. But you said that if you make it funny, people will forgive you. Yeah. And and I did stand up for a very, very long time. That's and right. the state of where we are now with all this wokeness and political correctness, has there ever been a subject that was off limits to you?
Well, yeah. I mean, for instance, during the after 9/11, when the anthrax was frightening, I had Jay Santos. Yeah, Phil, we're going to be doing nasal checks. We've got a swab. We're going to swab the nasal for anthrax. Okay. What if people don't want to do it? Well, it's too bad, because we'll hold them down. Just and we could hear him swabbing people's noses. But then the next week, I went to tuberculosis, and that was wrong, because tuberculosis is airborne. People can get scared, and and I thought it was irresponsible of me, so I pulled back. We did one bit where there was actually, in Los Angeles at the time, Steve, you might remember, there were gangbangers slingshotting the windows out of cars at night.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So I came on this kid, we're doing, we're slingshotting shit, whatever, well, this little girl called during the commercial break, and Jonah Weiland, my producer, says, you should talk to this kid. And this child she says, I'm really worried. I said, why? My mom drives at night. So I said, honey, it's me. I'm doing the voices. And you heard this girl go from abject fear to hysterical laughter within like 5 seconds.
Right.
Well, yeah, that's where I won't mess with somebody like that, when they're afraid. But by the same token, if someone calls in and tries to emotionally manipulate the conversation because they think they're going to stop me in my tracks. It's not going to happen. For instance, we were doing a bit one night, and a guy called in. He said, my stepdaughter, she died. She was murdered. You realize that? And my character goes, was she a piece of ass? Because yeah. And I said it, and I don't regret saying it, because, the fact is this guy was attempting to change the emotional tenor of the bit, and I wasn't going to let that happen. And if someone said, well, why weren't you more sensitive to that man? Well, why wasn't he more sensitive to the topic that we were discussing?
Sure.
Rather than dragging his daughter's fate into this whole thing. So, yeah, I think overall, you have to be a responsible broadcaster, as you know, which means you got a lot of power, and you can't be just sending out panic and that kind of thing. But you also need to teach the world that what they're listening to is horse shit. Excuse my French. Talk radio is horse dung. This is all a big performance. I did the kind of show that I did because I was not a big fan of talk radio. I thought it was all a lot of performative bull crap. Anyway, people calling up, hi, Gene, I really agree with you, and I think we should just drop bombs. Yeah, well, people think they're getting really an honest opinion there? No, they're not. So
right.
We went ahead, and I went ahead, I guess, and acted on that instinct, and kind of started to blow it up a little bit. But I mean, I wasn't coming to work every day. I'm going to destroy talk radio. It just was my instinct to mess with it, because that's what you do as a satirist. You see stuff and you go, oh, that really is pretty phony. I think that's going to be easy to just point up, and so you do it.
On that idea. Go ahead, Sue.
No, I was going to say that what I love about what you do is there's this like a geniusness to the sell. Like you did a show about euthanizing people over 100. You were talking about Bob Hope and saying he's taken up enough of our time, and then to sell it.
I forget the character. Go ahead.
I forget the character, but then to sell it, you were like, and I'm sure he and his family would agree.
And people will call, how dare you? Now, what you do is you say, well, it's reasonable. Bob Hope has been in our lives, every day of our lives, for 60, 70 years, and with good reason. A tremendous performer, great actor. But it gets to a point now where it's just Bob Hope is trotted out for everything. And even then, at that point, I would listen to him. He'd be like, hi, Bob Hope. You remember how Bob Hope sounded? He didn't sound like anymore. So, yeah, you'd say, I think, Phil, the time has come that we just go ahead and, well, how would you just put a pillow over him and just, oh my God, you're going to smother Bob Hope? Well, what difference does it make? He's, and of course, the outrage that it inspires also inspires even greater comedic heights. That's the great thing about it, because what's happening is 99% of your audience know it's you doing a character.
Right.
Only 1/2%. Only, as you know, Steve, only about 2% of your audience ever calls.
Sure.
And 1% that call, only maybe 1% are buying that this is a real person. So the audience is forgiving me. They know what I'm doing, and they're buying into it. And sometimes they'll say you went a little too far there, but so the caller is the only one that's really getting pissed off. And they're, whether they like it or not, a performer on the stage with me. We've dragged them onto the stage. They are now an actor, and they're assuming a part. And sorry, but Bob Hope is going to be smothered with a pillow. Yes, he's taking up way too much of our time. I forget that. That's pretty funny. I don't remember doing that.
So I have said in the past, and I always get shit for it, that I learned a lot from Rush Limbaugh. And I've heard you talk about that. The politics aside, I just thought he was a brilliant broadcaster, and I would put him on the Mount Rushmore of radio personalities.
And what's terrible is I'm diametrically opposite of Rush Limbaugh politically, but I have to give him due in terms of what he brought to talk radio. I got into talk radio, probably the freedom that I got in talk radio was because of what he did. And Howard.
Yes, and Howard.
And a little bit of Steve Dahl. And so they kept prying the door wider and wider open to walk through. Limbaugh brought it to talk radio, that kind of satire. Now, you say this to radio people who ought to know better, and everybody gets pissed off based on the politics. And I keep trying to say to them, I'm not really talking about politics. I'm talking about something we all should know, the art of broadcasting. And because of his bringing comedy to, or his brand of comedy, at least, to talk radio, it did open the door wider for guys like Phil Hendrie to come in. and do a satirical presentation, because they could always say, well, look at what Rush does. He does the homeless update and he plays all this goofy music and he's got EIB. Well, I always thought EIB was like brilliant, you know?
Yeah, it's incredible. Yeah.
Oh my God. And the character that he played, and it was a character, I am the authority. I mean, it doesn't get any better than that. So,
it's so funny. We, and again, I came out of morning radio, so I had, a lot of that silliness to me. But I remember doing a bit where Ireland and I were on at night, and we kept adding affiliates to the show. And of course, we weren't in syndication at all, but we would say, we welcome Bismarck. Want to say hello. Want to say hello to Tupelo. And we would have fake call letters and the whole thing.
I love that.
But people, you're right. There are people who get it and then people who don't get it.
No.
I did the Art Bell show, which was a strange experience, where they tell you, you have to accept every premise the entire night long. So if the guest says there are lizard people living in the earth, you must accept that premise. Now, in that case, I think a fair number of people actually believed
agreed
the stuff
with
on
it,
it, right? With that show. Now, you also have done some acting. In fact, didn't you do David Mamet's series? I think it was called The Unit, right?
Yeah, that was wild, because I remember the day that Mamet came in and directed an episode. It actually wrote a scene for me, and people were giving me the script later. Do you want this? I said, why? Because I was too thick. I didn't know. Well, David just wrote this for you. David Mamet, the guy who won every award there is. Oh, yeah. Because when I met him, David Mamet is a small New Yorker. And he says, hey, I'm Dave. How you doing? Yeah, the way I see this scene, I don't know. What do you think? So it's not exactly like a Pulitzer Prize winning guy that I had in mind. But,
Yeah.
did that. And I played a radio station manager because that's what they wanted to do. Well, he was in radio. Let's have him do that part. I did that for about 2 seasons, and it was great. I got to work with Dennis Haysbert, and I mean, that cat was great. And I was sitting in makeup in the morning, and I'd say, it's hard for me to sleep at night before I do a gig. I know how you feel.
Yeah, he's got the pipes.
Right, yeah, great pipes, great. I would have loved to have written a movie for him, but so that was my first experience with really recurring on a show. Yeah, but but I kind of wanted to just mention one thing about the radio thing with Rush, and that was, I think I already did. That was, people in radio should be far more aware of what he brought to the median in terms of his, sense of humor and satirical approach, and not be so. I know that people hated his politics. I would have to say that I'm one of those people, but I appreciate what he did. I just wanted to say that, but yeah. The Unit.
So
go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was going to say, with your skill with improvising, was that something that was allowed? You were allowed to do when you were doing acting, or because I would think I would think with Mamet it was like you have to say everything.
You step into lines, and I did a show called on adult. Some of the shows let you ad lib, yes, and some actors just go ahead and ad lib anyway. I did an animated show with Billy West, who's one of the most brilliant voiceover guys, and Billy would just make up whole lines. God, I want to have the guts to do that. And they'd rein him in. They go, no, Billy, no, read the script as it is. But only in some shows. For instance, I did a show for Adult Swim called it was Paul Scheer's show. It was only a 15-minute comedy.
Huh.
And Hal Linden was on it. Remember Barney Miller?
Yes, right. Hal Linden, sure.
Yeah, so Hal Linden's on it. And we're ad-libbing our asses off, because that was the way Paul ran it. And there was me and a few other, Matthew Starr, I think, was on the show. And Linden says during a break, so you guys, you get to not follow the script? They go, yeah, they let us. Do you get a writer's credit? No, not where I come from. He was stunned that this kind of thing was happening. And it did depend on the show, though. And you know what? You want to. I feel comfortable ad-libbing. I feel comfortable improvising. I wish I could do more of it, but I get it. A guy sweated his ass off writing the script. I don't want to just tear it up and throw it away. So,
do you have any idea how many voices you created?
40. I mean, characters?
Yeah, characters. Yeah,
I think 40 to 45, something like that. And a lot of them kind of sound the same. Some of the characters repeat back. They sound a little bit like the other ones. I have a character, his name's Frank Gray. This guy's based on my dad, you know. And he say, hey, Philip, you know, what are you doing? Just do, everything's a half sentence and a half word, you know. And and then I threw something in on Frank. And this was before the whole gender thing came into the culture. It was just funny to me that Frank called men her. You know, our son, Jason, she's a linebacker. Did you know that? No, I didn't know that. It's funny, isn't it? It just puts you away when you hear that, you know. But when the gender thing started to get real political, I changed it to it. We had Frank go and get treatment, and everything was it now, you know. Let me tell you something, Phil. I love my wife. I married it some 30 years ago. You know,
what was the last new character you created?
The last new character was probably this character, Ward Nuxley. Hello, it's the Phil Hendrie Show. I'm Ward Nuxley, and your name's Ward? No, it's Wayne, as I said. He's mentally, you know, now we're getting guys that need, you know, some. It's probably Ward Nuxley, and also there's a character that I have based on Johnny Carson named Don Mixa.
Nice.
Yeah, he's like this, and he's got bad breath. You know, so it's just, I don't know what you're talking about. Well, people are saying your breath is just, I don't know. I brush my teeth. What do you want from me? I got bigger problems. Yeah. What bigger problems than what, man? When you breathe, people are, but Don's relatively recent. And then there's a guy based on it. This guy's based on my history professor at Pasadena City College was Dr. Hall, a flat-topped, bespectacled, and, he talked like this with he had a plugged up nose. And every question you asked him, it was funny. Dr. Hall, when did the Spanish actually occupy California militarily? Well, let me just say, you know, everything was a big joke to him. Dr. Hall, what's the capital of California during the Spanish colonization? Well, so Dr. Hall, and I turned him into Dr. Ron Tarter, who's a climatologist and an astrophysicist, you know, and I love to play with this. I just think this is hysterical. I do it with my pilot character, 𝐒𝐸𝐥. What is causing the climate change? We don't really know. There's no real answer. It rains, but it's happening. It is happening. But, well, how do we fly? That's another one we can't get our head. You know, that's character I have, 𝐸𝐸𝐥. He says, do you fly, Art? Yeah, I'm a pilot. I've been a pilot for 40 years, but I'm scared to death every time I fly. Why? Because I have no idea why it's doing what it's doing. Every pilot's frightened of that. So every pilot doesn't know why the plane's taking off. No. You think they do? So I love it.
So are there people...
It also, just not to interrupt, Sue, but it also helps you. You don't have to write as much. You just go to that. You know?
Yeah, right. That's the bit.
That's the bit there. Yeah.
So are there people in your life who you've kind of stolen bits and pieces of who they are and done them on your show? Yeah. And they've said to you, Phil, is that me?
That's never happened. Because, you know, I don't have a lot of friends in the entertainment business, and I don't have a lot of friends who. I know my friends do listen to me, but I don't think they've ever said, is that me? You know, they just don't think that way. But I've had to tell them, you know that based on you. Actually, in my family, there's only two characters, Frank Gray and, three, Margaret and Bobby, that are based on my parents. I don't think there's any character. I have one character that was based on my stepkids when they were coming up. 13, 14, 15-year-old boys especially, sort of talk with an up inflection. And what were you doing there yesterday, fooling around with that dog? I wasn't doing anything. I don't know what you're talking about, you know? And I'll never get my stepson Alex was telling a story on the way to school one morning. He's talking about the guy, and then he came to the bridge, and then they blew it up, and then another guy came, and they blew up the other bridge. And as soon as I pulled into the word to drop the kids off, and then it ended. He down inflected. So I based a character named Jason J. Delmonico, and then another kid, Justin McElroy. I don't know. My mom's friends are always trying to show me their butts and stuff. What are you talking about? They're sexy and they're not. And God, dude, you know, yeah, I wish they wouldn't do that, you know.
So tell me about leaving radio. What went into that decision?
Well, radio was changing, and my show was my show was always a hard sell. It was hard to sell to advertisers. It was hard to affiliate. And I was getting tired, of having to put a masterpiece on the air every bloody day. And I recognized that there was this thing called digital. And my manager, my agent at the time, Don Buchwald, said, there's a thing called internet radio. I said wasn't familiar with it, but by that point, people were podcasting. Guys like Jimmy Pardo were already starting to podcast and doing it as a subscription service. So I got the rights to my show. I got the rights to my archives from Clear Channel, and I decided to take over my own website and start to market my archives as a subscription and do a daily podcast of some kind. And it's evolved radically over the years, and sort of be my own boss. And at the same time, there was interest in me, getting in front of a camera. So I started to do that. And that lasted about 2 years until I got really bored. I didn't like hanging around waiting for somebody to call and say I had a job. So I got back into our syndicated deal with a company up in Oregon, which was the biggest mistake I could have made, because that tied up the next 6 years of my life. But
oh, wow.
Essentially, man, I hate to say it, man, but radio has never been really a content-driven medium. Radio, unlike film, where you can win an Academy Award even though you had a movie that stiffed at the box office, or TV, where like Hill Street Blues won 5 Emmys and nobody was watching the show.
That's true.
They finally promoted the Emmys and everybody did. Radio doesn't have any real room for people that are not making money and bringing them greater glory. So it's not really, in my opinion, it's not really a content-driven medium. And my show is nothing but content and improv and making fun of everything around it. So I think the divorce came out of necessity. I don't think I was going to get much further down the road in the radio world. And what happened shortly thereafter, sports radio started to make a big surge because they figured this out. We don't like controversy, but hey, sports controversy we can handle, because who cares who's the Jets starting quarterback?
Exactly.
Yeah. So that kind of controversy they could handle. The only other thing they did is they just went full on into right-wing radio on the AM band, because everybody agreed with everybody over there, and the rest of it they just kind of jettisoned. So what you're looking at is a shell of a man here.
Come on. PhilHendrieShow.com. People are still getting it.
Sure, I got a house at the beach, but so what?
Yeah, right. Do you still feel that pressure to put on a masterpiece when you do your show on PhilHendrieShow.com?
Actually, no, but I have more fun because I can do anything I want, and not anything I want. I can't do the phone calls anymore because that dynamic's not there,
Yeah.
But I can improv anything that I want. I can create any kind of character I want. I can present it any way I want. So it's not pressure. It's joy. The only pressure is like, it'll be 9:00 at night and I'll go, geez, I haven't done a show yet. I got to go downstairs to the studio and produce a show. But I'm working for myself. I'm narrowcasting to my audience. I have my advertisers. I have my subscribers. I have that income, and I have other things that I'm doing now that bring in income that I never really thought would, dude. I didn't think I was going to be an actor. Like I told my brother was an actor, and I thought that was real sissy. I thought, you going to be like on a TV show like Love American Style or something? Yeah. No. So,
And now you got this documentary that captures.
Yeah.
The documentary is so good, Phil. How did the documentary come about?
I got a call from Pat Reynolds and Jordan Brady, two producer and director, who both of those guys are doing commercials, and Pat was doing commercial photography, and it was Pat's idea. He wanted to do a documentary. So I said, yeah, I was really flattered by that. I immediately went into my Phil Hendrie mode, which is, no, if this is going to be a documentary, it has to be honest, and I can't be involved in it at all. It has to be objective. So I'll step away and let you guys do that. Now, what I should have done is said, yeah, for about 3%, you guys just do whatever you want to do. In all seriousness, no, I let them run with it. I knew that they liked my show and they liked what they heard. So I knew it wasn't going to be a savaging rip job of any kind.
No.
But that was it. And they interviewed me, and then they set about finding all these great guys and people, and created this doc about.
Well, I mean, Phil, you're a legend. I mean, people in radio know Phil Hendrie.
I want Craig Kitchen to hear this right now.
I mean, and it captures it in an amazing way. So congratulations on the. It's great honor to get you on the show. It really is. Phil.
And congrats to Pat, because he made the movie and Jordan produced it, and no less a personage than and director than Joe Dante, who, if nothing else, gave us Gremlins. And Into the Blood. Joe thought it was great, and he made a point by saying he took a topic, which is a guy talking, that cannot possibly be interesting, yet he made it interesting with the animation.
Right.
I thought that was great. Looking at that, that was fantastic, and putting me in the Cadillac. And then getting just all the guys that were interviewed, I can't thank them enough. And I don't to this day, I know I'm going to leave a name out but I know that Derek Waters has always been such a great friend, and the producer and creator of a great show, Drunk History, you know. And,
yeah.
Well, Bill Hader was wonderful. Wayne Fetterman, Dana.
Judd
Apatow, who hired me. Kevin Pollak, who had me on his chat show. Henry Rollins, who is really the intellectual of the group, because Henry is talking about, now you have to understand the way he does the voices. There's an ellipse at the very beginning of the person. So Henry can explain that. I can't, you know.
Well, listen, the documentary. Go ahead, Sue.
I just wanted to say one thing. So in the documentary, you said that when you became successful, you were waiting for people to find out that you're a fraud. Okay.
Yeah.
And Kevin Pollak said that you were a singular talent that doesn't exist in captivity. Do you now, with hearing stuff like that and the success that you've had even beyond what you ever imagined, do you still feel that way?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I believe I've had this impact that I did not know I had. I wasn't looking to make money, and I didn't make any money, so that's really great. No, I'm kidding. But I was not looking to make money. I was not looking to be famous. I was looking to do something I'd never done in my life, which was express myself creatively the way I wanted to, and have people like it, have listeners. That was as far as it went.
Yeah.
When I got married to Maria, and I went to see her at her house in a cul-de-sac in Thousand Oaks, which was kind of a middle-class house, I thought she was living in a mansion. I had no conception of anything. So when I got to do what I wanted to do, and I told my buddy Don, you got to listen to my show now, man, because I've known Don since we were 12 years old. And he goes, this stuff's funny, because he knew me when I sucked. And when I had people wanting to hire me, I considered myself a success then. Now people saying all of these things about my influence on them, that's kind of hard to believe. I have to be honest. It's like the guy that says to me, and I've had this more than once, said to me, you saved my life. I was in a pit of depression. I wanted to blow my brains out. My wife was in a coma, and the first thing she laughed at was your show.
Yeah.
I don't know how to respond to that, man. I'm being very serious.
Sure.
I think I hope I never do, because if I start to get some sense of myself as, well, now, do you realize you're talking to a legend, don't you? I don't know what I'm going to do, but however, if any of that stuff comes with significant pay increase,
you're in.
I'll talk about it. Sure, let's do it.
Sure. The documentary is Hendry. It is airing on all of the streaming platforms. And if you want more Phil, go to philhendrieshow.com. Really great to get you on, Phil. Great to catch up. Huge fan. Always have been. Great influence in my career. Thank you so much.
Thank you, brother. It's good to talk to you, Steve. Sue, it's great to meet you. I hope to see you. I want to come watch you too.
I don't do stand-up anymore, but a lot of the people that, like, I know Jordan. I worked with Jordan, and I know Judd.
All those guys,
and Wayne. I started with Wayne, so.
Oh, wait, yeah. I want to somehow figure out how to do a live show. I did a live thing at UCB as Chris Norton. It was a benefit for Armenia. James Adamian, who's a comedian friend of mine, I didn't know we had so many Armenian comics in LA, but we got 1 million of them, and they all showed up for this thing. And I went and did Chris Norton, and the audience loved it. So I think that's the next thing I need to do. I need to get on a freaking stage and do these characters, and I don't quite know how to do that, but
Well, I will buy a ticket.
I know how you could do it. You should contact. Well, you know Wendy Liebman,
I don't
comedian?
know. I don't know her.
She has a great show at Flappers Comedy Club.
Awesome.
And well, what about Judd? I mean, he could get you on at Largo to do something. I would.
You know
think.
what? I should ask him, or somebody who produced, like James could produce it. Some of the cats over at UCB have offered to produce something. Yeah, I mean, I know I could get on stage, but I don't want to get on there and just like stink it up. I want to just come out and I don't know. I don't do stand up. I do. I'm taking up your time here, Steve. Just throw me off.
No, not at all.
Thank you very much, Phil. We were leaving about 5 minutes ago, and he's still talking. I think I'd like to do a good improvisational theatrical show of some kind, a one-man show, but we'll see. I think that's David Bowie says you should be in the pool where your feet are just barely touching the bottom. You'd always be just not quite comfortable enough in your work and your career. And that's where I want to get to,
Yeah.
Anyway.
Well, awesome, man. Awesome, Phil.
Thank you.
I will tell John Ireland you.
Yeah, tell him it was good seeing him. It was great.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Phil. Good to meet you.
All right. Thank you, Phil.
All right, brother.
Awesome, man. There you have it, Phil Hendrie. I'm not just blowing smoke. I mean, that guy, an absolute original. I don't know anybody who's ever done radio like that, and I don't think there will ever be another guy who does it like that again.
No, not at all. And when you think about what he did, and then you think, and I'm totally not putting a dig on Sacha Baron Cohen because he is brilliant in his own right.
Yes.
But you think about what Phil Hendrie was doing back then with being everybody, pretty much being everybody on the show and being as outrageous as you can possibly be and getting away with it.
Yeah. That's the thing. Getting away. And I don't know. Obviously, he's still doing shows, philhendrieshow.com. But I wonder if the boundaries have changed. Like, is there stuff that he could do then that he can't do now? I mean, I think the world has changed and has gotten obviously very, very sensitive.
Yeah, I've listened to some of his current shows.
Have
That's
you?
how I knew about that Bonabee character.
Yeah.
Nuxley, Bonabee Nuxley. And I didn't hear anything as outrageous as what he used to do.
Yeah.
But there's a part of me that thinks he could, because it's a podcast.
Yeah, it is a podcast. I mean, he could do a bit where they mention ball gravy.
Oh, absolutely. And then I think of his sponsors. Clorox is a sponsor.
Yeah.
And after you hear Clorox is a sponsor, he says, or one of the, I don't know if it's one of his characters or somebody that works with him on the show, it's the greatest value other than online porn. And then it's like brought to you by Clorox. And I'm thinking, Clorox, yay to Clorox.
Yeah, they're
for
in on
sponsoring
it.
his show, given what he, makes a comment like that.
Exactly. No, one of the things I took from that is he said, it's hard to work up the energy to create a masterpiece every night. Now, that kind of summarizes my day. Like, we're recording this at 11:32. In about an hour and a half, I am going to be in that mode where I'm trying to, and it takes a ton of energy to be able to do it. I'm lucky. Phil did a solo show, which is really hard. I've always got people that I can lean on and rely on. But it's hard to work up the energy to do a show every day. It's not just sitting there talking. You're putting, like when I was a little kid, we'd always say, let's put on a show. I feel like that every day. Let's put on a show. And it's hard to make it a good show every day.
Yeah. I mean, even though you have other people that you can, bounce off of, you have a very major part in this. So,
sure.
You have to bring it every day.
Every day.
And you're not, your stuff isn't planned. I mean,
no.
you know some stuff that you're going to talk about.
Right.
If there's the games you're going to talk about, or if there's something, significant in the world of sports. And you don't only talk about sports. You talk about whatever's going on in the world a lot of times too. So, it's a lot of work.
It's also interesting because I come home from work every day and I am not especially talkative. And Juan will say to me, you really leave the best of yourself on the air. And I'm like, oh, that's so sad.
Well, it's funny that you say that, because when I come home or not come home, but if I'm, I do a show with you and now I go out and I've been editing this documentary and whatever work I'm doing, and I come home and Tom's watching TV or he's on his phone looking at whatever, I'm like, oh God, I got to go into another room. I just want peace and quiet.
Yeah. All right. So I want to remind everybody that if you're watching on YouTube, you should subscribe to this channel because it's fantastic. And there are lots of shows going on right now, including our watch-along series for Sugar on Apple Plus, and it is fantastic. Great show and great podcast out there for episodes 1, 2, 3. We will track along. We will watch along as the episode moves along. And by the way, if you are listening on Apple or Spotify, please subscribe, leave us a 5-star rating and a review. Always nice. Maybe one of the questions for our YouTube page, greatest radio personality of all time. I mean, I would have to go with, I'll answer the question myself. I would go with Stern, Rush, Larry King, and Phil Hendrie. Those are the 4. People always get pissed off I put Rush on the list, but we talked with Phil. Maybe you get a better handle on it.
Right. Oh, the fact that you were talking about that, I just have to tell you really quick. Somebody sent me a interview that Richard Nixon did, and I have to send it to you. It was Fran Healy from the Mets.
Okay.
So this is, years after, Nixon, at Watergate and all of that. Anyway, he was talking about baseball with Fran Healy.
Oh, wow.
And he was talking about the Mets and he was talking about, the Yankees or whatever. And he was so entertaining and so smart about baseball.
Really?
And his passion for it. And I wrote to my friend, I said, my least favorite baseball fan.
Yeah.
But the interview was amazing.
Oh, send that to me.
I'll send it to you. It was fantastic.
Awesome. All right, there you have it. There's your Culture Pop podcast. Thanks a lot for listening and watching, and we will see you next time.